Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Tova McCall and I'm a licensed clinical social worker based out of the New York City area, and this is Holistic Bump. Today, I wanted to share some personal information about my birth story and give you some insight into how I managed to recover from this traumatic experience. Here's a trigger warning. We will be discussing the possibility of death of a baby and hospital trauma overall. If this could be triggering for you, please skip this video. You can watch many other videos on my channel that are not about this specific topic. So let's go back in time to 2018. The day of my labor, everything began quite regularly. I was 39 and a half weeks pregnant. My mom was in town from Canada to visit for the birth, and we were all gonna have a great Saturday in Manhattan. Mid-morning, I began spotting, and since it was a Saturday, I reached out to my OB's after-hour emergency number, but my midwife didn't get back to me until mid-afternoon. I received her call after a relaxing session at my acupuncturist's. Side plug, if you live in and around Manhattan, I highly recommend seeing Kevin Pinzone at Blue Lotus Acupuncture at 119 23rd Street. He is a godsend. I saw him while trying to get pregnant, all throughout my pregnancy, and then after birth. More about alternative healthcare methods in another segment of Holistic Bump. My midwife at Mount Sinai told me that it would be best if I were to get triaged at the hospital to identify the source of the bleeding. At the hospital, after several tests and ultrasounds, they couldn't find the source of the problem and decided, since I was already almost 40 weeks pregnant and that I was already at the hospital, that they would induce me. This is quite common practice when giving birth at hospitals. This was my first bout with intense fear, sadness, and shock. Something you don't know about me was that I desperately wanted to deliver at a birthing center with as little interventions as possible. Once you have to induce, you can't deliver at a birthing center and have to be placed in a general labor and delivery room. I began grieving the birth story that hadn't even started yet. I'll never forget what my first nurse told me at the hospital. You plan and God laughs. Despite our best efforts to be organized, meticulous, and plan our lives according to our values and ideals, plans often derail, which is the first lesson to processing grief and trauma. Expect the unexpected. If you live your life thinking everything will go as planned, you will be royally disappointed. During my 2.5 days at the hospital, I was given all the interventions. Pitocin, which is a synthetic version of oxytocin, which helps with the uterus contractions, and it is administered through an IV to kickstart contractions. A balloon, or more formally called the Foley bulb, inserted in my uterus and inflated, which puts pressure on the cervix to promote dilation and contractions. Electronic fetal monitor to constantly monitor my baby's heartbeat. Epidural via the spinal cord for pain management. And lastly, artificial rupture of the membranes, or in other words, using a long stick to break my water. All these interventions were used because my labor was happening so slowly. I'd gone through 3 different hospital staff shifts, and my midwife, who had seen me initially when I came to get triaged on Saturday, had managed to go home, go away for the weekend, and return for her shift on Monday morning in time to deliver my baby. Something my midwife did during the last few hours of my delivery was perform a perineal massage, which is gentle manual stretching of the pelvic floor to prepare the muscles and skin between my vagina and rectum for birth, with the goal to reduce the risk of tearing and scarring during delivery. This worked wonders because I did not rip during delivery, and I am convinced it is because of this massage, and I am forever grateful to my midwife. Once at 10 centimeters in the early hours on Monday morning, I began pushing for 2 hours and felt completely depleted and exhausted. After the millionth push, my baby boy finally came out. The nurses put the baby on me for some skin-to-skin contact, but quickly realized he was not making a sound. The next part of the story happened both so fast and in slow motion. From my recollection, and also from reading a letter my husband had written to our son as a memento of his monumental entrance into this world, the nurses began panicking and on their Vocero machines, which is basically a wireless communication like a walkie-talkie, calling for backup. It sounded like a SWAT team in a raid. Nurses were panicking, calling for help. Within moments, a slew of doctors entered my hospital room. Minutes were counting down. I still hadn't heard my baby make a sound. I felt like the walls were closing in on me, and all I could hear were people screaming and saying things like, "He's not breathing," and repeating various numbers which were of little significance to me or my husband, but since they were saying with these numbers with such force and intensity, I assumed they were not numbers we wanted for a newborn. After 15 to 20 minutes, and yes, I'm not kidding, it was 15 to 20 minutes, there were about a dozen doctors in my hospital room, and my son finally made a faint sound, at which time they wheeled my son out of the room. At that point, I didn't know if my son was really alive or dead, brain dead or alert, healthy or sick. But my midwife was a gem. Throughout this whole ordeal, I had my eyes shut. My husband was holding me, rubbing my shoulder, trying to stay strong and hold it together for us. My midwife was focused on me, telling me things like, "You are doing great, focus on me." She was massaging my cervix, trying to deliver my placenta. And did you know that I had never even heard about the fact that you actually have two deliveries when you give birth? First, you give birth to your baby, and then you give birth to the placenta. Once my baby boy was wheeled out of the room to be taken to the NICU, which is the neonatal intensive care unit, a few doctors stayed in the room and tried to comfort me. One doctor said that my baby was just in shock and that they were running some tests. During this excruciating waiting period, all we could do was hope that our son was fine. After hours of waiting, a pediatric specialist doctor at the hospital gave us the surprising news that our baby boy seemed completely fine. The only explanation they could give was that although he hadn't been breathing for so long, he was still receiving oxygen from the blood in his umbilical cord, even though it was already cut. Although my little nugget was hooked up to a bunch of machines, he seemed to be healthy and safe. And now, 5 years later, our little boy is thriving. The body is somewhat of a mystery. We thank our lucky stars every day for delivering us a happy, smart, energetic, empathetic son. The second lesson to processing grief and trauma is to tell your story. Immediately after the birth happened, my husband began vigorously writing it down. I cried a lot, and I cried at every little thing. And every time I told the story, I would break down, but I would make a point to tell the story to anyone who would listen. My friends, my family, the pediatrician, even my acupuncturist. Pregnancy and giving birth are truly miracles, and birth trauma is not uncommon. Remember two things. One, when thinking about your birth plan, think about it as a possibility and not a necessary end result. And two, if you experience any complications or birth trauma, talk about it. Don't keep it in. Otherwise, the body will find a way to get it out, either through nightmares, flashbacks, or other PTSD symptoms. Thank you for watching. My name again is Tova McCall, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to my birth experience and learned a thing or two about what helps to combat birth trauma. Please subscribe to my channel, Holistic Bump, where we talk about every pregnancy-related topic, all the way from trying to conceive up until the first year after birth.